Hello， 大家好，我现在呢在跟两位加拿大朋友。
Hi, I'm Kristy.
And I'm Bryce, and we're from millennialrevolution.com.
OK， 他们现在呢已经退休，你们退休多久 ？How long have you retired?
So we've been retired for almost 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
So what have you been doing for 4 years?
Okay, so a lot of traveling. A lot of traveling. We've also been writing a blog called themillennialrevolution.com. We have also been writing a book with Penguin, and we have been meeting friends all over the world.
Oh, that's very nice to have a lot of friends around the world.
Yeah. Now we know someone in Thailand.
Oh. So yesterday I went online on Instagram. I asked my viewers what question do they have for you, and they have a lot of questions.
Really?
But generally, they have one question in common: is how did you do it?
Awesome. Okay, so the story is originally we were just going along the regular path, which is get a job, buy a house, have kids, work until you're 65, and then maybe retire at 65. So, but we lived in a very expensive place in Canada. We lived in Toronto, where the housing price is around $1 million. Yeah, for a single home. So at the time, we were trying to save aggressively to buy a house in Toronto, because that's what everyone else was doing. And it was right around the time in 2012 where we had been saving for 5 or 6 years, and we had saved around $500,000. At that point, we started to think, this housing thing seems to be making everybody go a bit crazy. Like, we would go to open house and everybody would have a bidding war on the house, and then immediately people would buy houses for $500,000, renovate it for just a month or two, and then sell it for $800,000, and then people would buy it immediately, even though there's so many problems with the house. So then at that point, I started to think, is this a Ponzi scheme? Like, are people just buying houses because everyone else is buying houses, or does it actually make sense? So around this time, my work started to get more stressful. So so I worked as a programmer in Toronto, and they started to outsource a lot of the jobs to India. So people were stressed out that they were going to get laid off, and then the stress accumulated to one day where my coworker, he dropped at his desk and ended up being rushed to the hospital because he actually had to have surgery because he was working so many hours that he almost died at his desk. So it was right about this time I thought, really expensive house, work is getting more stressful, work is not very stable, and then I started questioning the advice that our parents gave us, which is work until you're 65. And then I thought, can you really work until you're 65 if you get laid off or you die at your desk? How are you supposed to work until you're 65? So that was around the time we decided, okay, what else are we going to do instead? So instead of putting the money towards a house, we actually invested it in index funds. And from the 2012 onward to 2015, which is when we retired, that was the time that we actually amassed $1 million portfolio. And then we realized that, hey, if we actually can live on 4% of the portfolio, we can actually just be retired. We don't have to work anymore, and we don't have to stress. I don't have to die at my desk. I don't have to put everything into a house. And we just decided, let's do that instead.
How long did it take you?
So it actually took us around 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah.
Only 3 years?
Only 3 years.
Well, to go from $500,000 to
$500,000 to $1 million.
I think the overall,
The stock market was going up at the time, and we were also putting in about slightly over $100,000 every year because we were saving it. We thought we were going to buy a house, so we were saving it like crazy. But the total time from when we started working to when we retired was about
9 years.
9 years.
So when the minute we started working, if you count to the time we retired, that's 9 years. But to actually retire from when we started investing, it was about 3 years. Yeah.
All right. So it's not a long time to a lot of people, 10 years, 20 years. Yeah. So that's very cool. I'm not a professional interviewer.
Oh, no worries.
Not everyone started with success. So did you face any failure?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, when we first started our investing journey, I guess that was the first time we started trying to invest anything. It was just before 2008. So when we hadn't decided that we were going to buy a house yet. So we started putting money into the stock market right when everything blew up.
Yeah.
And that was probably the scariest moment that I've ever seen investing. I mean, you were just talking earlier about what it was like last December when things started. When the stock market goes up, it's fun. When it goes down, it's scary. And back then, people were talking about, oh, it's the collapse of the global financial system. So I remember distinctly putting in $1,000 into the stock market, and then the next day, the value dropped by $1,000. So it just seemed like I was just losing money every single day. But the thing with index investing is that because the index fund invests in every company in the stock market at the same time. So it's practically impossible for the index to crash all the way to zero. Because in order for the index to crash to zero, every company has to go bankrupt, which is not going to happen. So the correct thing to do in the market crash in those situations is to continue buying it as it goes down. And so that's what we did. It wasn't fun. It was probably the scariest thing we've ever had to do. But because we did that, what happens is as it crashes and you buy more and more and more, you pick up more units at a cheaper price. And then when it eventually comes back up, your portfolio rebounds faster than when it went down. So within a year of the crash, we had already recovered all of our money. So we actually managed to not lose any money in the stock market. So that was probably the biggest kind of stressful part of that whole journey. But we did the right thing, and we kind of knew the research, and we knew what the right thing to do was, and it came out okay.
Yeah, the interesting thing is because of 2008, like once we recovered the money, we actually jumped out of the market because we had gotten married, and we said, okay, maybe we're going to buy a house now. So that actually resulted in us missing 3 years of the bull run from 2009 to 2012, right? So the funny thing is, even though the entire journey to retire took 9 years, it could have been shorter if we hadn't, decided to take the money out and buy a house. But even with that mistake, we still managed to, get there at early 30s because we saved money. And going forward, we decided to continue investing and not do any panic selling, not jump out of the market. So it really is like, even if you make a mistake, over the long term, it's not really going to make any difference. Like over the long term, if you if you actually invest and you don't try to make big changes and you actually save a lot of your money, the mistakes won't really matter. This is what we learned.
You have about $500,000 saved. A lot of people, they don't have $500,000. And a lot of people in Taiwan, for example, they don't make $500,000.
Right.
Yeah. So do you think anybody can do this?
I think that the thing is, you could do, if you have a lower salary, there's two things you can do. You can either, it will take you longer, but you will still end up getting there.
Yeah.
What you could end up doing is, instead of waiting until you're completely fully there, you could be working on a side hustle. Like a lot of people do passion projects on the side. So the thing is, we realized that if you had a side hustle, let's say just earning $5,000, because we were writing children's books, that would not be able to support your living expenses. However, if you use that to supplement the money coming up from your portfolio, it's actually a lot of money. You wouldn't have to save an additional $125,000 to generate that passive income, right? So one path to do it is you could have a side hustle and use that as your FU money to help you get out of your 9 to 5. Another thing you could do is try to get a promotion or work towards something towards investing in your education to get a higher salary, right? So I understand that not everybody is going to be a computer engineer and immediately make 6-figure income, but that's okay. The point is not okay, I have to get to this FI number and I'm going to focus only on this and nothing else. The point is to have enough money for financial security so that you have the freedom to have options. One of the things I noticed with my friends after discovering this FIRE community is that what she does is she's working on a contract, and even though she's not financially independent, she has some money saved that's generating income. So it allows her to take time off between contracts and have mini retirements in which she can work on her passion. She can spend time with friends. So it really isn't about reaching $1 million. Isn't about having a really high salary. It's about having money that is paying you some passive income, so that you have the freedom to choose rather than be forced to work.
And to add to that, the new kind of explosion of remote work and being able to travel wherever you want, work in one place but live in another, has really opened up a lot more options for this kind of thing as well. Let me give you an example. So we had a reader of ours who used to work in California, and she worked in California doing, I think she was in Silicon Valley or something.
Yeah, she was working remotely.
But the thing is, her company was completely remote, so there was no office, and they were all working out of their homes. But she was living in California, so the cost of living was very, very high. She was making good California money, but she was spending California dollars.
Yeah.
And she didn't realize until we talked to her that it's like, as long as you're in the same time zone, they're not going to care where you are. You could be in Mexico, and from their perspective, it's exactly the same. And then she kind of went, huh, that's true. So like a year after that, she moved down to Mexico, and she lived in Oaxaca for a while, I think. So she continued making the same salary that she did before, but her cost of living dropped by like more than half, because now she's spending Mexican pesos in Oaxaca, where like, to give an example, in California, the rent for like a one-bedroom apartment is like $2,000-3,000 a month.
At least $3,000.
At least $3,000 a month. In Oaxaca, it was like $400.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
So all of a sudden, she's still making the same amount of money, but she was saving like almost all of it now just by moving. And in Asia, there's a lot of different options for this kind of stuff too. I mean, like we're here in Thailand right now, and the cost of living, like if you work in Hong Kong but you live in Thailand, it's a very, very different. You can if you're able to work remotely, you can make money in Hong Kong but live in a very different. Lower cost of living, like in Thailand or in Vietnam or in Cambodia or anything like that, and all of a sudden you'll be able to save a lot more. So there's a lot more options now that with the explosion of remote work and what we call now digital nomadism.
Yeah. So what we found that the marriage between the financial independence movement and the digital nomad movement is actually a really good thing, because you don't have to worry about like, oh, I'm working, remotely, but then like, what if my business is in trouble, or what if I have to start a side hustle and it's taking a long time? You can have this financial security of having like a portfolio. It doesn't have to be $1 million portfolio. It can be a portfolio that's paying some of your expenses, but then you also have the work, and it allows you to become allows you to have less stress because you have the freedom, but without having to like have crazy salaries or create $1 million portfolio. So it's like what I see, the way that I see it is like, if you have money, it represents freedom. It represents that being able to choose rather than being so stressed out that you have no choice but you have to work like everyone else.
And remember, it's not like we keep saying $1 million. It's like the actual number is not that. Like the $1 million is not the goal here.
Yeah.
What you need to say is how much how much your living expenses are times 25%, 20-25. That's the 4% rule. And but if you add travel to that and geographic arbitrage, it's really how much you would be spending living in a lower cost country that you're willing to live in. Like for example, if you're working in Hong Kong, but you from Vietnam, if you're willing to go back to Vietnam to retire, you don't need like 25 times how much you spend in Hong Kong. You need 25 times how much you would spend in Vietnam.
Yeah.
That's how much you need to save up, not $1 million, which is a very arbitrary number if you think about it.
Right, and plus if you're making some side income, like you multiply that by 25, and that's the amount that you don't have to save in your portfolio because you're making that every year from your side hustle to cover your expenses.
So it depends on how much you spend, not how much you save.
Correct.
Yeah.
And where you're living.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's
exactly.
so basically you don't need to aim for $1 million goal, but aim for 25 times of your expenses.
Right.
Yeah. And what I find is very helpful is like, instead of having one big goal that seems really difficult to reach, like, oh, I have to save $500,000, I have to save $1 million. No, you should really have more like a milestone type of thinking, because we didn't just automatically like do this, one day we woke up and then did this, right? It was really kind of like a series of small steps that every time you reach that goal, you should be celebrating. Like maybe you want to just save $10,000, and once you reach that goal, then you're like, okay, the next $20,000, and you kind of like step up your savings rate, because it's not going to be automatic. Like all of a sudden I'm saving 50% of my income. That's too much of a stretch goal. Maybe you start with like 10% of your income, then you jump into 20%, and as you get raises through work, maybe you like increase that as you go, right? So it really is kind of like a glide path to financial freedom, rather than, oh, I have this massive goal and like, how am I ever going to reach it? And we'll just give up. What's the point, right? You really have like the milestones that along the way, just like you do anything in life. You break down the big task into little tasks, and every time you reach a goal, you celebrate.
How did you celebrate it?
We spent a lot of money on traveling, because one of the things that was not important to me was like living in a big fancy house. We took a lot of public transportation because we were in a big city. You have the subway, it's better for the environment, why not? We don't need to buy a car. So, but the thing that we were not willing to compromise on was travel. So that was like our most important thing. So once you figure out what your priority is, it's totally okay to spend money on that, as long as like things that you don't care about, those things you like become very efficient in optimizing optimize the cost on that. But then you allow yourself to have splurges because that makes you happy, right? Like travel makes us happy. We don't want to cut back on that. So we really mostly celebrate it with vacation. So anytime we reach a goal, maybe we think like, oh, let's take a vacation to Cuba, and then we'll like buy a vacation package, and we will never feel guilty about the money that we spend on that because it's towards something you care about, right? But if somebody was like, oh, well, why don't you go spend money on like a fancy car? I would never do that because it's like, wow, I don't need that. Why would I need that? That's not important to me, right?
So every year you withdraw about 4%. And for 4% of the money, that's 44,000. So does that mean